Hey guys, welcome back to the Adventures of Cosmic, and I'm Cosmic. I noticed that some of you guys haven't fully subscribed yet, okay? I have 31 subscribers when I should have a little bit more. If you like these videos or any other videos I post, I suggest you subscribe to this channel because I enjoy making videos, and this is part of what I do in my free time. I also crochet, I also make my fan fiction. I have a lot of stuff I do, but this is one of the many things I like to do in my free time. So, yeah. So I'm gonna show our email of proof I have permission. Just so you know, YouTube. Okay? So here's the email. Everybody knows about this email. It's not a surprise, okay? YouTube, if you need to, you can pause and read this, okay? For now, I'm gonna get back into Jolene book, Great Mistake by Leanne Dobbs, read to you by Hollis McCarthy. And it's a really good book. We are on chapter 10, about halfway through. We're at a very crucial point, so if you haven't watched the second part or the first part, I suggest you go watch the first part, then the second part, because you have to understand what's going on in order to understand where we are in the book, okay? Thank you, and make sure after you're done watching those two parts, if you haven't already, come back to this, okay?
Celeste said, "We'd love to know more about Ezra. What was he like? What did he like to do? What was important to him?" "Well, I don't remember much. Except him talking about the pharmacy and Lila May sometimes. He said she had the most curious gray eyes." Finch thrust his thumb over his shoulder in the direction of Wendy, who had made herself almost invisible over by his bedside table. "Like my girl Wendy here." Wendy smiled self-consciously, and Morgan noticed she did have unusual gray eyes, which complemented her hair nicely. "They must have been very much in love," Morgan said. "I suppose so. I don't know anything about love, never married myself." Finch paused, lost in thought. "I don't remember Ezra doing much else, except his pharmacy work. But he did like to play cards from time to time." Jolene remembered Celeste had said his ghost had wandered off to play cards. Was card playing important to him? Nah, not really. Oh, he liked it, but after his wife died, his true love was that pharmacy and his medicines. "Do you know much about his pharmacy business?" Morgan asked. "Nah, I was a kid. Didn't pay much attention to business. But I loved the old coot. Him, my granddaddy, and my pappy. All gone now." His eyes shone, and he leaned forward in the chair. "But I done them right. Buried them in the family graveyard and kept the graves neat and tidy. I even put up that obelisk right near Ezra. He always said he was the most important part of the family. So I figure it should be near him." Morgan narrowed her eyes at Finch. "Did you say you put the obelisk in the graveyard after Ezra died?" "Why, yes. I figured it was a nice memorial for the graveyard. Of course, I kept it nice and all, tended the graves regularly, and was even hoping that someday I might be laid to rest." "That's it." Morgan snapped her fingers, cutting Finch off in mid-sentence. She spun on her heels and headed toward the door, motioning for the others to follow. When they got out into the hall, she turned and poked her head back in the door. "Thanks, Mr. Finch. It's been great talking to you, but we gotta run." If the obelisk wasn't even in the graveyard during Ezra's time, then the similarities between the pattern on the obelisk and the Oblate Museum must just be a coincidence. It can't be the clue that Ezra's ghost said he left. The real clue must be on his grave, Morgan explained, her words coming out in short puffs of condensation as they picked their way through the tall grass on the Finch farm toward the graveyard. "That makes perfect sense," Celeste agreed. "Thaddeus said that Ezra thought he was pretty important, and his ghost told me he left the clue in the center the most important part of the graveyard. I thought he was talking about the obelisk, but now it makes sense that he would be talking about his own gravestone. Jolene scrunched her face up. Seriously? How could a guy leave a clue on his own grave? That is what we need to find out, Morgan said. They walked up the cement steps to the family plot. A chill crept up her spine, and she stopped and turned, looking back out over the field behind them. Are we being followed again? Fiona asked. Possibly. Probably. Morgan gazed out over the field, her eyes searching for any movement that would indicate they were being followed, while her intuition focused on locating a presence her eyes couldn't see. Was someone out there? She felt something wasn't right, but couldn't see anyone. She took a deep breath of crisp, cold air. It was heavy with the wet, frosty smell of snow. A glance up at the gray sky told her the first flakes would come any minute. She turned her attention back to the graveyard. Let's just focus on the task at hand and keep our eyes peeled for visitors. They approached the old slate stone that marked the grave of Ezra Finch. It wasn't anything extraordinary. Tall, with a rounded tombstone top and a weeping willow engraved on it. As they stood there, looking down at it, the snow started. Big, fat flakes landed silently on their jackets. One fluttered onto Morgan's eyelashes, obstructing her view, and she brushed it away. Jolene squatted in front of the gravestone. Maybe this stone has a hidden compartment in it, like the one we found out west, she said, referring to an old gravestone on another of their missions that had a secret housed in a slide-out piece at the base. It would be a perfect place to hide a clue. Fiona wrapped her purple scarf around her neck. The snowflakes, which were falling faster now, stuck to her red hair like confetti. Jolene pushed at the bottom of the stone, trying each of the four corners. It doesn't seem like this one has a compartment. Morgan was only half paying attention. Something to the east caught her eye. The visibility was slowly being cut down by the storm, so it wasn't something she could see, but more something she could feel. What is it? Jolene looked back over her shoulder in the direction of Morgan's gaze. I don't know. I think I'm just jittery. The storm was closing in, causing whiteout conditions. She could barely see 20 feet away. The gravestones took on an eerie cast as they faded into the white background. Anyone could be out there, and they wouldn't see them until it was too late. Maybe we should come back later. Jolene stood and brushed the snow from her pants. Maybe. I can't find the compartment, and I don't see how Ezra could hide something in his own gravestone anyway. Maybe he didn't hide it. Maybe he left the clue right on the stone. Celeste brushed the snow off the face of the stone and pointed at the inscription. Morgan shielded her eyes and squinted at the rock through the driving snow. The inscription was typical, with the names, birth, and death dates of Ezra and Lila Mae Finch. Celeste stepped closer to the stone. Tapping her finger on the poem inscribed below the names, she read it out loud. When two become one, the healing's begun. In my favorite place under the sun, look to the west, I can finally rest. So you think that's the clue? Fiona asked. Hey, wait, it looks like there's more below. Jolene squatted down again and brushed the snow that had accumulated in front of the stone. Just under the inscription, Morgan could see another line at the very bottom, almost under the soil line. What's that say? Celeste bent down to look at it. I can only see the tops of the letters. I can't make out what they actually are. Morgan noticed the wind had picked up considerably, and the visibility had faded to almost nothing. A tingling at the back of her neck told her danger was near. Jolene dug furiously at the soil with her gloved finger. The ground is frozen. I I can't uncover the last line. She had to shout over the wind to be heard. Something's not right. Morgan looked around at her sisters and saw her concern mirrored in their eyes. The wind whipped their hair around their faces as they glanced around uneasily. Morgan's heart sank. She could barely see 2 feet in front of her. She wondered if they could even make it back to the car when the wind increased, picking up the snowflakes from the ground and whipping them around, creating blizzard conditions. She shouted for her sisters, but the wind snatched the words out of her mouth. The only sound she could hear was the gusting of the wind. The snow, so soft and fluffy just minutes ago, stung her cheeks like shards of ice. She whirled around, totally disoriented, her heart thudding in her chest. Feeling an evil presence near them, she stumbled backward, the wind pushing at her, causing her to topple over. She crashed to the ground, pain searing her right arm and hip. She struggled to get back up, but the wind was too strong. It pinned her to the ground. Crack! Morgan felt a sharp pain above her right ear. And then there was nothing but darkness. Morgan woke
Where's
to a
Luke?
mouth full of snow and a splitting headache. Her right side was practically frozen solid, and she realized she was lying on the ground. Then she remembered what had happened. Her eyes flew open, focusing on Jolene, who lay 10 feet away under a large tree limb. Morgan herself had some smaller branches on top of her, but she easily pushed them off and ran over to her sister. Relief spread through her as she noticed Fiona and Celeste sitting up and shaking snow off their coats. Not Jolene, though. She lay as still as death. "Joe, are you okay?" Morgan ripped off her gloves and knelt in the snow, pressing 2 fingers on Jolene's neck. Her heart squeezed at Jolene's ghostly white cheeks, but she had a pulse and her eyelashes fluttered slightly. "Jolene, wake up!" Fiona and Celeste moved the tree limb and joined Morgan beside their younger sister. Jolene's ice blue eyes flickered open and looked around, unfocused. Worry gnawed at Morgan's gut as she watched her sister push up to a sitting position, her brow furrowed as she looked around at Morgan, Fiona, and Celeste in confusion. "What's going on?" Jolene asked. "Good question," Celeste replied. "There was a storm and you got hit by a tree limb." Jolene looked at the large limb Celeste indicated and then past Morgan. Morgan followed her gaze. The snow and wind had stopped, but the cemetery looked a mess. Glancing up, Morgan could see the white raw wood where the large limb had sheared off from the big old oak tree. Smaller branches lay strewn about, but that wasn't the most startling sight. The most startling sight was Ezra Finch's gravestone. It lay smashed in a million jagged pieces. Now, they'd never know what that last line was. "Are you okay?" Morgan asked again, as they helped Jolene to her feet. "Yes, of course," Jolene made a face. "That takes a lot more than a little branch to hurt me." Morgan raised her left brow at Fiona and Celeste. The fuzzy look in Jolene's eyes had cleared, and she seemed fine, but Morgan didn't want to take any chances. Trouble was, Jolene was stubborn and probably wouldn't listen to them if they wanted her to see a doctor. Morgan tried anyway. "I think we'd better take you to the hospital and get you checked out." No, I'm fine." Jolene pushed her sisters away and took a step forward. She was a little wobbly, but not too bad. She turned in a slow circle, looking all around them, her forehead creasing in a wrinkle that got deeper and deeper the more she looked. "What the heck are we doing in a graveyard?" Chapter 11. If you can't remember what we were doing at Finch's, then I think you need a doctor. Morgan looked across the kitchen island at Jolene's pale face and regretted letting her sister talk her into taking her home instead of to the hospital. Joanna gave Jolene a motherly frown. She's right. You could have a concussion. Concussion? What happened? Jake stood in the kitchen doorway, his face a mask of concern. A tree limb fell on Jolene and knocked her out, Morgan explained. Jake crossed the kitchen and stood in front of Jolene. He tilted her head up toward the light and pried her eyelid open. Ouch! She pulled away, covering her eye with her hand. What are you doing? Checking your pupils. I used to be a cop, remember? I know a little bit about concussions, Jake said. Are you feeling nauseous or dizzy? Any blurred vision, headache, forgetfulness? No, and no, Jolene said. Well, you did forget why we were at the Finch farm, Celeste pointed out. I'm fine. I'm not going to the hospital, Jolene said. Her pupils look okay, and she doesn't seem to have any other symptoms. I guess we just watch her and make sure she doesn't show any signs of concussion. We can't force her to go to the hospital if she's too stubborn to know what's good for her. He shrugged. How did you guys make out on the farm, anyway? Did you find a new clue? And how did the tree branch fall? The three sisters filled Jake and Joanna in on the trip to the cemetery, the clue on the gravestone, and the strange windy snowstorm. Luckily, Luke came in at the beginning, so they didn't have to repeat themselves. Jolene leaned against the counter, unusually silent, taking it all in. Do you think the strange storm was some kind of paranormal force? Luke asked. Maybe. Morgan looked at her sisters and they nodded. If paranormal can control energy, then why not the energy of the wind? Luke nodded. There are forces out there we can't even imagine. But is this wind person in cahoots with Bly? Good question, Fiona said. We don't know who it was or who they were in cahoots with. It sounds like the trip out to the farm was eventful. But did it give you guys a new lead on the relic? Jake asked. Fiona nodded. Obviously, the clue couldn't have been on the obelisk, so we think it was the epitaph on Ezra's gravestone. There was a poem on there, and we think it might be the clue. Too bad we never got to read the bottom line of it, Celeste added. Why not? Luke asked. The stone must have settled over the years, and the very bottom was under the ground line. We could just see the tops of the letters, but not enough to tell what letter it was, Fiona explained. And the stone blew to smithereens in the windstorm, Celeste added. Jake snorted. That must have been some windstorm. I don't think wind can blow up a stone. Luke nodded, his face turning serious. That's right. Whoever caused that must have some power. I want you girls to be extra careful from here on in. I'll put more guys on detail watching you. Morgan sighed. She would have argued, but she knew it was futile. Luke was serious about safety, especially when it came to her, which did make her feel all warm and fuzzy inside, except for the part where someone followed her around. At least Luke's guys were inconspicuous. She hardly knew they were there most of the time. But why would Bly, or whoever, want to smash the gravestone? Probably so no one else could figure out the clue, Celeste said. Then it must be really important, Luke said. That bottom line could be the key to finding the relic. Jake's right brow ticked up. Maybe we could go back and piece it together? Celeste shook her head. The pieces are too small. Joanna pressed her lips together. I bet Cal could figure it out if you girls could draw the tops of the letters. Morgan thought about that. Cal, an antique dealer by trade, loved history, and one of his specialties was codes and encryption. He'd figured things out for them before. Too bad she couldn't remember what the bottom of the stone looked like. I don't remember exactly what it looked like. That's okay. We have a secret weapon that can help us, even if the bad guys destroyed the clue. Jake looked at Jolene. Put your photographic memory to use and draw out what the top of that line looked like.
She's...
A look of panic crossed Jolene's face. I can't. I don't remember. Morgan's stomach sank. Was Jolene's memory gone for good? Hopefully not. But right now, they needed it.
Maybe you
She
could jog her
glanced at her
memory.
sisters, and she could tell they were all thinking the same thing. What other unique skills had Jolene lost in the accident? Jolene noticed everyone looking at her and scrunched up her face. What? Nothing, Morgan answered for them. I know what you're thinking, and you're wrong. I can still use my paranormal gifts. Jolene thrust her hand out, as if to shoot off an energy spark. Nothing happened, and she put it in front of her frowning face. Well, I think I can. She thrust it out again, harder this time. Hey, don't vaporize my favorite crystal lamp over there in the living room. You're pointing right at it, Joanna warned. But she didn't need to worry about the lamp. Jolene couldn't muster any energy. No matter how hard she focused, the best she could do was produce a teeny glowing pink drop, which formed at the end of her fingertip, then fell off, disappearing into nothing before it hit the floor. The forlorn look on Jolene's face tugged at Morgan's heart. She put her arm around her little sister. Don't worry. I'm sure it's just the effects of getting knocked out. I'm sure your gifts will come back. She hoped her words were true. Jolene was the most powerful of all the sisters, and they'd have a hard time defending themselves without her skills. Morgan made a mental note to try to develop her own defensive paranormal skill. So, what do we do now? Luke asked. There's at least 2 groups in town looking for the relic, and if you guys don't have any clue at all, how can we possibly hope to find it before they do? I wouldn't say we don't have any clue at all, Morgan said. I think the rest of the epitaph might tell us something, even though we won't know what the bottom says. Luke leaned back against the kitchen island and crossed his arms over his chest. Okay, tell us what the rest of it was, and let's see if we can figure it out. Morgan repeated the epitaph. When 2 become 1, the healing's begun. In my favorite place under the sun. Look to the west, I can finally rest. Jake made a face. What kind of poem is that? You should have seen some of the other ones on the other stones, Fiona said. It's not a very good poem, but if it's a clue, then I guess we should try to figure it out, Joanna added. Luke looked skeptical. How do we even know if it is a clue? Ezra's ghost told me he left a clue before he died in the most important part of the graveyard, Celeste said. And by all accounts, he thought he was pretty important, Fiona added. So it stands to reason he left it on his gravestone, Morgan said. But how would he leave it on his gravestone? Luke asked. He'd already be dead when it was engraved. Yes, but he might have left instructions in his will, Celeste suggested. Luke nodded. True. We could check on that. And since we have nothing better to go on, we might as well try to figure out what it means. Well, it seems like the second line would be a pretty big clue, Jake said. In my favorite place under the sun, Joanna repeated. Who knows where his favorite place was? Maybe Thaddeus? Morgan suggested. Celeste made a face. We could ask him, but his answers aren't always reliable. Maybe the first line is a hint at his favorite place, Celeste said. When 2 become 1? Morgan narrowed her eyes and looked up at the ceiling. Where does 2 become 1? Maybe it has something to do with one of the roads out near the farm, Fiona suggested. Like where 2 roads merge? Morgan shook her head. No, I think it's something that has more meaning. His favorite place. And the bit about looking to the west, Jake said. That's got to be a clue that the relic is hidden in the western section. Yeah, but of what? Joanna chewed her bottom lip. Celeste snapped her fingers. I've got it. Thaddeus said that Ezra loved his wife, Lila May. Remember, he said he was really upset when she died and threw himself into his pharmacy work? Yeah. Morgan raised her brows at Celeste. Think about it. When do two become one? Celeste looked at them with wide eyes. And when no one answered, she continued, when they get married. Joanna smiled. Of course. The second line makes perfect sense then, because his favorite place would be where Ezra and Lila May got married. You think that's where he hid the relic? Jolene asked. It's a good place to start, Morgan said. There's only one problem. What? How do we figure out where Ezra and Lila May got married? I can help out with that. Jolene's face lit up with eagerness, and she hurried out of the kitchen into the east parlor, motioning for them to follow. Morgan slipped behind the desk next to Jolene, while Fiona and Celeste stood in front of it. Joanna stationed her chair beside it, and Luke and Jake hovered in the doorway. Morgan looked over her sister's shoulder as Jolene flipped open the laptop. The login screen blinked at them. Jolene frowned at it, her fingers poised over the keyboard. After a few seconds, she quickly typed a username and password. Wrong username. I must have hit the wrong key. Jolene tried again. Wrong username. Huh. What the heck is wrong with this thing? Jolene's voice was edged with annoyance. She tried a few more combinations, punching the return key harder and harder with each failed attempt. Finally, she looked up at them. Okay, who changed my login? Morgan looked over at Fiona and Celeste, who both shrugged. No one changed it, Morgan said. Someone did. Or maybe I can't remember it. Jolene's voice cracked. Joanna reached over and put a reassuring hand on Jolene's arm. It's okay. That's just part of getting hit in the head. A good rest and you'll be fine. Jolene looked uncertainly at her mother, and Morgan's heart pinched for her. Would Jolene be fine? I'll get one of my carnelians to help. Fiona hurried out of the room. Her special gift with crystals and stones included a way with carnelian, an orange stone associated with healing. Fiona had used the stone several times in the past to speed up the recovery time for various wounds. Morgan hoped it would work just as well for a head injury. Morgan leaned over and typed her login on the keyboard. We can still get in. Now, where do we start? Google. Jolene straightened in her chair and started typing. Her disposition improving as her typing produced a list of articles on Ezra Finch. Morgan squinted at the screen. She ran her index finger down the list. I don't see anything here about the wedding. Well, I have work to do, Luke cut in. I'll leave you girls to it, but don't go running off without telling me. He shot Morgan a warning look, which she countered with an innocent smile. Of course not. We would never do that. She leaned out from behind the desk and gave him a peck on the lips, then ducked her head back down toward the screen. I better get going too, Jake said. You girls are the experts at computer stuff. He headed toward the doorway, meeting up with Fiona, who had a bunched-up towel in her hand. She slipped into the hallway with him for a hasty goodbye kiss. Well, looks like it's just us girls. Fiona came back into the room and handed the towel to Jolene. Put this on your head. The carnelians are inside. Jolene accepted the towel. She opened it cautiously and peeked inside. Over her shoulder, Morgan could see the orange glowing stones. Jolene wrapped it back up and applied it to her head like an ice pack. Look, here's an article on his pharmacy. Fiona, who had joined them behind the desk, pointed to an entry halfway down the screen. Morgan clicked on it and scanned the article. Gee, I guess he really was important. Yeah, and there's a picture of the pharmacy building. It was pretty small, but I don't remember seeing that anywhere in town, Fiona said. Let me see. Celeste leaned over the desk and they angled the laptop so she could see the screen. Oh, that's right on the Finch farm. It's about 200 feet from the house. I remember seeing a pile of debris I thought was an old chicken coop near the barn that fell down. It says here it burned. Morgan tapped the screen. The police investigated but didn't find anything suspicious. Old wiring, I guess. That was only about 7 years ago. Interesting, but I don't see anything about him getting married, Jolene said. That information is probably too old to be in Google, Celeste pointed out. He would have been married way before the internet even existed. Yeah, probably. But it's not too old to be in the town records, and those were just digitized and put in a database last year. Jolene put the towel down, turned the computer back toward her, and started typing furiously. If I can just remember... There. Morgan bent over her shoulder to see an official-looking website. A search bar blinked at the top. Jolene typed in Finch, and a listing appeared on the screen. That's a lot to look through. Morgan pressed her lips together as she perused the list. It looked like every birth, death, and marriage in the Finch family since the dawn of time was represented. She sensed an energy drain beside her and turned to look at Jolene, who appeared tired and pale. You go lie down with that thing, and I'll take it from here. You've done the important part. Jolene stifled a yawn. Maybe I'll just lie down on the couch in here. I don't want to miss out on anything. Morgan slid into the chair as Jolene made her way to the couch. She squinted at the screen. Okay, so let's see what we have here. Fiona looked on over her shoulder. This looks like the births, deaths, and marriages. Maybe we can narrow it down to just marriages. Morgan typed in Finch marriage at the search bar, and a new screen appeared. She scrolled back into the 1800s, where Ezra would have been married. Aha! Here it is right here. Fiona tapped the screen with a red polished fingernail. Ezra Finch married to Lila Mae Finch, place St. Anne's Church. Isn't that the old medieval-looking church out on Fowler Road? Celeste asked. Fiona nodded. Yep, that's the one. But it's been abandoned for years. Do you think that the relic would still be in there? Morgan shrugged and snapped the laptop cover closed. There's only one way to find out. Chapter 12. St. Anne's Church sat at the end of a rarely traveled road, surrounded by woods. The Gothic-style stone structure still looked impressive, even though most of the windows were boarded up and a tree was growing out of one of them. This place has sure seen better days. How does a church become abandoned anyway? Fiona asked. Celeste stared at the sagging roof. It's too far out. Everyone started going to St. Michael's in town. They circled the outside of the building, their feet crunching in the snow. The cathedral-style doors had big boards nailed in front of them, so no one could get in. The back and side doors were also nailed shut. How do we get in? Jolene asked. Morgan tuned up her intuition. She turned slowly like a dowsing rod, looking for a way in. Instead of the familiar ping that would tell her which way to go, she felt a nagging buzz in her stomach. A buzz that told her they probably shouldn't have come to this creepy old church out in the woods at dusk. Hey, look! Celeste interrupted Morgan's focus, and she turned to see her pointing at a narrow window that had 2 boards missing. So much for using her intuition. Maybe she should have just used her eyes. Celeste was already over at the window, the bottom of which was waist height. She lifted her leg, straddled it, swung her other leg over, disappeared inside, then poked her head out. Come on in. Jolene, who was shorter than Celeste, tried to hoist herself up and over, but failed on the first attempt. You should be home resting, Morgan said, regretting her decision to let the obviously exhausted Jolene accompany them. Jolene waved her hand. I'm okay, just a little tired. Besides, you guys might need me if we run into bad guys. A funny feeling crept into Morgan's stomach as she watched Jolene hoist herself onto the window ledge and swing herself over. Would Jolene be able to help them if they ran into bad guys? Morgan let Fiona go next, then switched on her flashlight and followed her sisters through the window. The pungent, musky smell of dry wood and mildew hit Morgan's nose as she watched the dust motes they'd stirred up dance in the light of the flashlight. She stifled a cough and surveyed the nearly empty church. It sure does look weird with all the pews gone, Fiona said. That's for sure. Celeste aimed her flashlight in a slow circle, illuminating the rest of the church. There wasn't much to illuminate. Most everything had been taken, even the lights. Morgan aimed her light at the front. The altar was still there, and behind it, the wall showed a lighter spot where the cross had hung for decades. Creepy. A layer of dust had settled on the floor. No one had been there in years. Look, they even took out the stained glass windows. Jolene stood at one of the window openings, now just covered with plywood. Morgan remembered the colorful windows that had illuminated the church with jewel-like light. They were gone now, probably taken when they closed the church. If they took everything, then what are the chances the relic is still here? Fiona asked.
It could have been hidden.
Depends on where he hid it. Jolene started toward the altar. Sometimes they had a hiding spot up under the altar. Really? Where'd you hear that? I never knew about it, Fiona said. Jolene turned back with a half shrug. I heard it somewhere. She tapped the side of her head. Maybe my photographic memory is returning. They followed her to the front, the cathedral ceiling and empty room amplifying the echoes of their footsteps on the marble floor. Meow. Morgan turned toward the sound, her eyes widening as she recognized their white cat. Belladonna, how did you get here? Morgan searched her sisters' faces, but they looked as puzzled as she was. They were miles from home. It wasn't possible for the cat to just walk here. But it wasn't unusual either. Belladonna had shown up at sites far from home before. Maybe she hides in the car, Fiona offered. Jolene bent down to pet the cat, and soft purrs echoed off the walls. Well, we can't do anything now. She's already here. We'll just have to make sure to load her in the car when we leave. They crawled around on the altar, tapping and pressing on the wood, looking for something hollow that might indicate a compartment under the floor. Hey, maybe it's under here. Celeste moved a pile of debris, and a mouse skittered out from underneath. Ack! Belladonna took off after it like a shot. The mouse let out a tiny squeak as it raced to the wall and flattened itself to fit under the molding. Belladonna hit the wall a split second later, then jumped back and glared at the place the mouse had disappeared into. Tough luck, Belladonna, Fiona said to the cat, who continued to stare intently at the piece of wall. I'm glad she didn't catch it. Celeste gingerly poked at the debris, then moved it aside to see if the floor held a secret compartment. I don't need her leaving another mouse head in front of me. Meow. Scratch, scratch. Give it a rest, Belladonna. That mouse is not going to be stupid enough to come back out, Jolene called over her shoulder as the girls resumed their search. But Belladonna didn't give it a rest. She continued to meow and scratch in the most annoying manner as the girls continued to search for a secret compartment. I don't think there's any secret compartment with a hidden relic here. We must have gotten the clue wrong again. Morgan's heart sank. She looked around the altar. Had they covered every inch? She stood and brushed the dirt off the knees of her jeans. Let's go home. I'll get Belladonna. Morgan walked over to the wall and attempted to pick Belladonna up. Belladonna jumped away, and swatted at Morgan angrily.
Oh.
Hey, cut that out. Morgan made another grab for her.
Only Teo.
Ow! Belladonna scratched frantically at the wall. Morgan squatted next to her. What's this? The tile next to the wall had several cracks. Morgan picked at the edge with her nail, lifting a section up. It looked like there was something underneath. Slowly, she pried up the rest of the tile, her heartbeat picking up speed as she saw a copper ring underneath it. Fiona, Celeste, and Jolene had come over and were standing behind her. Check this out, Morgan pointed to the ring. What's that? Fiona asked. It looks like there's something under there. Celeste curled her finger under the ring and pulled, but it didn't budge. Maybe this is where the relic is hidden. I think we need to pull up more tiles. The girls got busy pulling up the next tile. Belladonna sat a foot away, licking her paw and running it behind her ear. I just hope that mouse doesn't come out, Celeste said as they pried up another marble tile. They pried up another tile, and now Morgan could see that the ring was attached to some sort of trapdoor or cover about 8 inches square. She held her breath, grabbed the ring, and pulled. It creaked open, revealing a shallow, dark compartment. Morgan practically laid on the floor to peer in, but it was too dark. Without saying a word, she extended her hand, and Celeste slapped a flashlight into it. Morgan aimed the light into the compartment. Hey, there's... Something skidded across the floor, spinning to a stop in front of Morgan. Her heart froze when she recognized it as a licorice. A black crow licorice. She heard a hollow click and the words, "Hand over the relic or die."
Who said that?
Chapter 13. Morgan couldn't see the intruder's face, only his dark silhouette against the thin sliver of light from the open window in the back of the church. She glanced down at the licorice. She didn't need to see his face to know what he was, a cold-blooded killer. Beside her, Jolene fisted her hands on her hips. Who the heck are you? You don't know who I am? The intruder said in a subdued baritone. That's funny, because I know who you girls are. You're the ones who killed my brother, and I won't have his death be in vain.
What?
Hand over the relic, now.
Brother.
Morgan's brow
Who?
furrowed. Killed your brother? What are you talking about? Don't play coy with me. The intruder took a menacing step forward. Morgan's stomach clenched. She glanced down into the hidden compartment, then slammed the lid and stepped in front of it. Thoughts whirled through her brain. Clearly, this man was the licorice killer, and he'd been following them to find the relic. But was he aligned with Bly, or just in it for himself? And who was his brother? She didn't have time to contemplate that, though. They needed to get out of the situation. Her eyes slid over to Jolene, who was flexing her hand as if to summon her paranormal powers. Morgan wondered if she would be successful, or if they would have to fight the man off without Jolene's skills. She shifted her gaze back to the intruder and wondered what kind of paranormal powers he would unleash on them and how they could combat him. Now! The intruder jerked the gun toward the box, and for the first time, Morgan noticed that he held his left hand slightly behind his back. Was he holding some sort of paranormal contraption? She hoped it wasn't one of those energy-draining geodes the bearded guys behind the museum had used on her. Morgan let her attention slide to her sisters. Fiona had scooped up some small pebbles in her hand, and Celeste was inching her way to the right. The tension in her body told Morgan she was ready to launch into one of her karate kicks at any time. Why do you want the relic so bad anyway? Morgan figured it was best to keep him talking while her sisters fanned out around him. I have my reasons, the intruder ground out. Now, move aside. He took another step toward Morgan. Jolene flexed her hand faster. Morgan glanced down at the compartment. Well, I don't know what all the fuss is. What are you going to do with a little thing like this? She could see the intruder's face now, and he wasn't nearly as menacing as she would have expected. He didn't have a beard, for one, and his tanned face had a look of sincerity. In fact, he seemed almost sad, like he didn't want to be holding a gun on her. She hoped her intuition wasn't failing her, because from what it was telling her, the man was no threat at all. I don't know what you're playing at. He took another step, and she noticed he was chewing something. A black crow licorice, no doubt. You know right well what to do with that. You killed for it. Morgan's brows mashed together. Who did he think they'd killed? Why do you keep saying that? We didn't kill anyone. The intruder laughed. Oh, I know all about you girls. You're cold-blooded, paranormal killers.
What?
You'll do anything to enhance your powers, including killing an innocent man.
What?
What are you talking about? You're the one who is a killer, Morgan said. His eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I didn't kill anyone. Sure you did. Right in downtown on Beach Street. He had a paranormal energy burn, and I know it was you because I saw the licorice beside his body. Morgan gestured toward the man's licorice-chewing mouth. Confusion washed across his face. You're trying to trick me. You're the paranormal killers. We are not killers. Jolene punctuated the last word by thrusting her fingers out toward the man. Normally, a stream of potent energy would fly from them, but now only a small dribble of dots slowly floated out toward him. He reacted by bringing his left hand out from behind his back, revealing some sort of reflective mirror gizmo. The dots of energy bounced off the mirror and shot straight back at Jolene. Ouch! Jolene grabbed her arm where she'd been hit with the ricochet of her own energy. Fiona had reacted quickly. Before the energy could bounce back at Jolene, she flung the stones in her hand toward the man. But he was quicker. He pivoted, holding the mirror in her direction, and the stones bounced off it and sped back toward Fiona. They hit her jacket, making little singe marks. Down feathers poked out of two of them and fluttered into the air. Morgan felt relieved that Fiona's attempts to use the stones as weapons hadn't been too successful. Otherwise, she might have been badly hurt. But now, it was up to Morgan and Celeste, and neither of them had any paranormal fighting abilities. Morgan did have one thing, though, her intuition, and she used it now to sense which direction the man would strike. He came toward her, and she jumped to the left, while at the same time Celeste kicked out toward his gun hand, connecting with it and sending the gun flying. Hey! He turned toward Celeste, his fists up as if to hit her. Then he hesitated. Morgan could see emotions warring on his face as he stared at Celeste. The hesitation gave her the advantage, and she lowered her shoulder, then plowed into him like a linebacker and knocked him to the floor. Fiona ran for the gun. Morgan leapt on the man's chest, Celeste on his legs. Jolene grabbed a length of rope from the pile of debris Celeste had moved earlier. They turned him over on his stomach and then secured his hands behind his back. Morgan was surprised and suspicious that he didn't offer much resistance. They flipped him back over. Surprisingly, he didn't struggle. Okay, you girls win. Something in the man's voice niggled at Morgan. He sounded resigned, too resigned. And then she realized something odd. The man hadn't used any paranormal moves on them, aside from the mirror. Morgan suspected he didn't have any paranormal skills. So, just who was he? I suppose you'll kill me too now, he
What?
said, as they moved him to a sitting position. He screwed his eyes shut and hung his head. Go ahead and get it over with. The girls exchanged confused looks. He was acting very odd for a killer. Did he really think they had killed someone? I told you, we're not killers. Morgan said.